So our good friend John Walco has requested a trilogy of terror for Halloween week. This will be the first of three essays or blogs on the three films he suggested. We're going to do this first, and this is one of three. And the three, of course, are The Secret of the Blue Room, a classic movie with every doubt. The Premature Burial, the film version. And, of course, number three, I Buried a Living, which, according to Stephen King, inspired his short story Obits, which was published in 2015 in his The Bizarre Bad Dreams collection. He referenced I Buried a Living and noted that the story was inspired by the film, and he listed the movie as one of the scariest films ever made, but of course criticized the ending like most critics have done. Now in this one, it was directed by famed B-movie director Albert Band and starred Richard Boone and Theodore Bickel. Came out in 1958, written by Louis A. Garnfinkel and produced by Garnfinkel and Band. Now, according to Robert Evans, who always said the poster could sell the movie, as you can see, the poster is pretty freaky. Now, in this one, Robert Kraft is the newly appointed chairman of a committee that oversees a large cemetery. Good job, he can bury it. The cemetery caretaker, Andy, keeps a map in the cemetery office displaying the grounds in each gravesite. Filled graves are marked by black pins and unoccupied, but sold graves are marked with white pins. New to the position and unobservant, Kraft accidentally places a pair of black pins where they don't belong, only to discover later that the young couple who had bought the grave sites in question died in an automobile accident soon afterwards. He believes that he marked them for death. Now, this was before Twilight Zone, of course. Hoping will give him peace of mind, Robert replaces a random white pin with a black pin. When that person dies later in the week, however, he becomes increasingly convinced that either he or the map wield some kind of dark power. Repeated experiments undertaken upon the insistence of skeptical friends and co-workers yield the same results. Kraft, played again by Boone, slips into deep guilt and depression and believes he is cursed. The police, who were initially skeptical, eventually begin to take notice and in the hopes that it will reveal the cause of the deaths, ask Robert to place a black pin on the grave of a person who was known to be in France. Although he does so, Robert continues his slide into despair. That same night, he decides that if the black pins give him the power of death, white pins might give him the power of life. He replaces all of the recently placed black pins with white pins. When he goes to associated grave sites later that night, he discovers that they are all open with the bodies gone. Upon returning to the cemetery office, Robert receives a call informing of the death of the man in France. As he hangs up the phone, the cemetery caretaker comes up behind him, covered in dirt. He realizes that he's been killing all of the marked people as revenge for being forced to retire. However, when Robert informs of the death of the man in France, the caretaker, who couldn't have killed the man, begins to lose his mind and collapses. When the police arrived, he finds the caretaker dead and tell Robert that the news of the man's death was all a ruse to flush out the cemetery caretaker. Now, that's why Stephen King didn't like the ending, because he believed, he copped out towards the end. So Theodore Bickel is also in this, playing Andy McKee, and the film's music actually was composed by the great Gerald Fried, and the film was shot by Frederick Gately and edited by Frank Sullivan. Released by United Artists in July '58, you think it was a Halloween movie. Did well with the critics on Rotten Tomatoes at 64%. Now, sci-fi critic Ian Berriman noted that I Buried a Living was basically just like an extended episode of Twilight Zone, but that's not a bad thing since it's like a good episode. And at only 76 minutes, again, just like a mini TV movie. Film Trit said, with a title like I Buried a Living, one would think this picture could be sleazy 50s horror fare, a product of Corman release AIP, but is actually a pretty tense little psychological thriller. The review expressed disappointment with the film's ending, like many people, but late-night viewers didn't mind it, but praised its dark, moody cinematography, sometimes striking if sparse visual design and ominous music. Now, again, Dance Macabre, which he talked about his influences, and mentioned about that. Now, let's go over the difference between this and Obits, just to show you it. I think he... now, in this movie, or this short story, only came out 10 years ago, Michael Anderson studied journalism at the University of Rhode Island. Following a string of odd jobs after graduation, he's offered a job as a webzine Neon Circus on the basis of a joke obituary he wrote for an actor who died of a drug overdose. The editor of Neon Circus, Jerome Whitfield, gives him the obituaries column. After Whitfield denies him a raise, Michael writes her obituary as a way to vent his frustration. A colleague later calls him at home to tell him that Whitfield is dead. He tries to rationalize it as a coincidence, but when he writes about another obituary for a living person, it becomes clear that he actually has a power. The power becomes like an addiction. With each use, Michael feels a stronger compulsion to use the power again. Serial killer through print. Eventually finds he killed not just specific individuals, but simultaneously anyone who shares the same name. He leaves Neon Circus, moves to Wyoming, and takes a job painting houses. He stops using computer generally, but keeps a tablet computer to read Neon Circus occasionally. He remembers one of his professors taught that the end of any story is the end only for now. Now, this was nominated for the 2016 Hugo Award for Best Novelette and won the 2016 Edgar Award for Best Short Story. And a lot of people believe that the whole of the Bazaar of Bad Dreams should show up as a TV series. Now, the publisher was Charles Schwabner Sons, and again, print. I think there's an Audible book out there someplace anyway. So, now that short story collection, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, had 20 stories. They included, again, besides obits, Mile 81, Premium Harmony, Batman and Robin have an altercation, The Dune, Bad Little Kid, A Debt, The Bone Church, Morality, Afterlife, or Herman Wouk is Still Alive, Under the Weather, Blockade Billy, Mr. Yummy, Tommy, The Little Green God of Agony, That Bus is Another World, Obits, Drunken Fireworks, and Summer Thunder. Now, the came out in fall 2015 with great results. This was the 6th collection of short stories, the 10th collection overall. Again, the collection itself won the Shirley Jackson Award for Best Collection. The paperback edition, released in 2016, includes a bonus short story, Cookie Jar, which was published in 2016 in VQR. So again, ladies and gentlemen, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. We know that Stephen King was influenced by different things, and actually, of all things, are The Fugitive. And that's something that a lot of people don't know. Stephen King is a lover of all things important. So what John Walco, I think, wanted to impart, this was something that everybody should know was or wasn't really a horror movie, was more, again, something that could be assessed by the poster and by the interpretation of evil. So, but Richard Boone, a Western star, doing this was kind of freaky. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you like what you're doing here with our screenshots and remote control podcast, thank you, John. This will be the first of his trio of Halloween special. His requests. Let us know what a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And don't forget, if you're walking through a graveyard on Halloween, make sure to know where the gate is. You might need it. Have a good one. Bye.